everybody, I'm Pastor AJ Houseman, and welcome to 10-Foot Pole, a podcast dig deeper into aspects of the Bible that get glossed over or totally ignored in most preaching. The Bible has a lot of parts that are racy, uncomfortable, and sometimes downright horrifying. Let's talk about it.
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 27. Today, our guest is Pastor Kelsey Green, who is the pastor of The Table, the Lutheran Episcopal Campus Ministries in Baltimore. Thank you for joining us today, Pastor Kelsey.
I'm so glad to be here.
I'm very excited to have you, one, in this synod, and two, as a part of a campus ministry community with me, because you're one of my favorite pastors, so...
Honestly, likewise.
So much. Well, Pastor Kelsey is here with me as we sort of round out our Pride Month stuff. Yeah, podcast episodes. Yeah, as we have highlighted a couple of authors, and now I want to highlight Pastor Kelsey. So the authors that we have recently highlighted are Jamie Brieshoff, who wrote the book Raising Kids Beyond the Binary. And I just love Jamie and her words and helping us as we envision an actually inclusive church for all of God's children, and understanding that we are, gender diverse. And then we had Pastor Colby Martin for our live podcast recording at the Delaware, Maryland Synod. And Pastor Colby shared his beautiful book, Unclobber, and which I still encourage everyone to take a look at and to read, especially if you're someone that's kind of coming to this idea of LGBT inclusion in the church, and you had this mindset, well, I was told this growing up. I encourage you to take a look and wrestle with Pastor Colby's book, because part of his book is that he also wrestled with that. And then did the work and the things that we talk about on the podcast, right? This very deep exegetical work, and how that influences and informs our theology as we take a deep dive into Scripture. And so to round out sort of, I'm putting a lot of information, a lot of books at you, I want to just bring in a little personal story. And so right now, what I have asked Pastor Kelsey is to share her story. Pastor Kelsey is a beautifully and wonderfully made multiracial and queer leader of this church. I am so grateful for your ministry in New York, as well as now in Baltimore. Can you tell us about your story, maybe a little bit about your coming out, and then your coming out as a pastor, which is a whole separate thing?
Yeah, I would love to. I think it's really funny. I have known Jamie Brieshoff since I was 18 years old, and that may seem very recent, but to me it seems light years ago.
Did you grow up in New Jersey?
I did not, but I worked at a New Jersey summer camp.
Oh, you were at Crossroads?
Yeah, where I met Jamie and Rebecca and the whole Brieshoff team. When I was young and discerning a call to ministry. That first summer at camp is where God called me to be a pastor. So Jamie's been a co-conspirator, and it's really great to see just how their family has rallied around Rebecca and her call to advocate at the statewide level and at all types of levels for trans kids and gender diverse kids. So it feels rather full circle. I will say my Instagram bio says very old / very gay, and I am relatively young in the grand scheme of things, but I was the first person in my high school graduating class to come out.
So you came out in high school?
I came out in middle school.
What?
Yeah.
Oh man, bold. What year is that, by the way?
2006.
Okay. Yeah.
I was just very gay, and and I was being bullied pretty bad for being gay, even though I didn't know I was gay before then. I think everyone else knew a little bit and was kind of pointing at things that I had been unaware of or kind of pushing to the side for a long time. And out of that bullying, I think I bullied myself for a little bit, and I believed a lot of lies about how the people closest to me would react to the reality that I convinced myself that I was going to be like cast out into the dark world.
Yeah.
So many of the stories that I had heard about queer people, not always from queer people, were stories filled of like trauma and shame and despair, that I set myself up for that.
Yeah.
And luckily, that wasn't the reality that I was encountered with, but I was almost prepared for that.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're kind of like ingrained that like that's going to have to be a part of your story if you're gay.
oh, 1,000% that like you'll never have joy, love, or happiness, and I have all three of those things. So I wish I would have found the joy, I think, a little bit earlier, and it could have transformed the way that at least I felt about myself. Like, the older I get and the more counseling and companionship that I do with folks who are queer and coming out and walking that journey, is saying like, this is a great thing.
Yeah.
Like, you being yourself is a great thing. Like, not only am I proud of you, but like, I'm excited for you. My mom still to this day, which like, God bless her, but she's always like, you being gay is not the first thing people need to know about you. But I think it's one of the best things. I think it's allowed me to see the world in a really different way and through a really different lens. And that like my life has been made better because of my queerness, not in spite of it.
Yeah. Okay. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I have the best friends in the world, and there's something so intrinsically powerful and joyful about commonality shared between friends. So like having chosen family, a queer chosen family, puts us on kind of an even playing field almost. Like there are things that we don't have to talk about. We don't have to do the like trauma dumping bare bones. We can just kind of get into the fun, which is really nice. It wasn't always that way. I am like a middle millennial. Like I wouldn't say like I'm like the youngest millennial, but I'm definitely not an elder millennial. And no shade to the elder millennials. I see you out there. However, I grew up with like access, maybe unlimited access to the internet, which was probably the worst thing my parents could have done for me, but also the best.
Oh, same. We just had like a computer in the basement. My parents had no idea what I was doing.
In the computer room.
In the computer room.
In the computer
in the basement.
room
and like,
in the basement.
Yep. And like, no, I could just go and do whatever I want. Like there were no, like they had no idea. I knew how to use it better than they did, right?
Yeah.
Like they weren't telling.
So why weren't they watching me on AOL Instant Messenger? But I had access, for better or worse, to chat rooms. And that was the first time that I encountered like queer people writing things about queer experiences that I was like, oh, I also feel some of these things, or like I also think some of these things, and these people don't seem like miserable.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't have to be miserable.
Yeah.
Too.
What concepts? Yeah.
Yeah. I've always been kind of I'm a Leo, so much so that I was born 2 months premature. So like I was supposed to be a Leo.
Right,
that's what I tell myself over and over and over again.
I like that.
So I've always been a little bit extra, but I experienced a lot of like grief, like the deaths of loved ones at a really young age.
Yeah.
And I've just always kind of been sad. So like I am very happy, and if you meet me, you're like, ooh, she's the life of the party, she's great. And that's true. But there is also like a deep sadness that lives somewhere inside of Kelsey.
Well, part of that, like, is because your dad died when you were very young, and like that really is effect. Yeah,
it's true, and I think
to lose a parent at a young age is
one of the funniest parts of I think me being queer is my dad, and it's gonna be like, her dad's dead. It's true. However, like that sadness lived inside, but everyone else got to see the like nice, fun things.
Yeah.
Until I started getting bullied. And then I was sad all the time.
Yeah.
And my parents were like, something's happening to her and we don't really know why, what's going on. But I wasn't ready to share. I had shared maybe to like a couple of friends, or I had broadened my media content. Like I started reading different books. I became like scarily obsessed with the Broadway musical Rent. And I don't mean that in a like, I don't mean that in like, oh, she was listening to the music. I mean like memorizing the script. Like I was really going through it. But I was starting to identify with stories within the queer community that were filled with people who also felt big things. And I think it gave me the freedom to explore some of those big feelings that I was turning inward to turning them outwardly.
Yeah.
So when people would say things like, oh, you're gay, I would pause and maybe like just kind of ignore what they were saying. But then I would take that with me and go home and kind of try and figure it all out.
Yeah.
Found a lot of companionship in watching Degrassi, The Next Generation, with characters like Ellie and Marco, and seeing queer experiences and identifying them as maybe part of the experiences that I was having. And then I told my sister, I have 3 sisters, and I told one of my sisters and my niece, who is 6 months younger than me, and we were kind of in school together. But I wasn't ready to tell my parents. I was just kind of like, oh, I hope my sister will keep my confidence. She didn't react very poorly either, so I had a bit of hope. Yeah, I had a bit of like, oh, well, if she's not freaking out, maybe that means our parents won't freak out.
Yeah.
I told my mom through like this tearful confession, and my first words, I remember them so vividly. I had like, this is so dramatic, AJ. It's like not even, it's like dumb to think back about, but like I made an AOL instant messenger, like AIM away message that was like, be right back, ... And then I came upstairs from the computer room and like called my mom into the kitchen. And I was like, I have to tell you something, but I'm really nervous to tell you about it. Can you sit down? She sat down and I was like, I think I'm gay. She was like, think? And I was like, I may or may not have a girlfriend. What? How weird. I did. Her name was Faith. And my mom said, oh, okay, I guess it sounds more like think and like actually are. And I was crying, sobbing, sniffling, snot running down my face. And I was like, I just don't want you to hate me. She said, I can never hate something that I made. And that was so powerful to me. The art of creation. My parents lost a child before I was born, like almost 8 months before I was born. My mom wanted to be a parent so bad that I think the thought for her of me being like ashamed to tell her or embarrassed to tell her or nervous to tell her, like really upset her. I think she was like, if this is what you think about me, like maybe I have failed in my ability to show you what type of parent I am.
Yeah.
Right?
I think I'd probably react to my child that way. But also, again, like you're being fed with all these things that say this is the norm of how you're going to get treated, even if it's not.
Yeah. And she said, well, I love you so much and nothing will ever change how much I love you. Thank you for telling me. And I kind of like wiped my tears and we had a really nice hug. And when she brought me in for the hug, she whispered in my ear, don't tell your dad.
Oh.
My dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease when I was 10. And he had a very rapid decline in his ability. By the time I was like 12 or 13, he had quit his job and was at home most days while I was at school. When I wasn't at school, I was kind of caring for him after school at home while my mom worked full time. And I've always been like a team dad kind of girl. Me and my dad had a really close relationship, at times much closer than the relationship I had with my mother. And I was really mad at my mom for putting up a boundary based on her fear, not on the reality that there was anything that I could do that my dad would lose favor in me, but her fear of his reaction. So
did you?
Yeah, as any sneaky like 13-year-old would do, my mom was gone for the day, and I sat down and I told my dad, like, we were sitting on the porch outside. It was the summer. I was getting ready to go to summer camp for the day. I was going to a very expensive performing arts day camp. Yeah, I know. Cool. Am I a performing arts person anymore? Some would say yes, but no, I am not on Broadway. Just simply a pastor. And I said,
performative art sometimes.
Sometimes. I'd say most of the time. I think we're on stage. We're on stage for Jesus and not on stage for ourselves. But and I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm gay." And he said, "Oh, great. I guess that means you won't have any kids out of wedlock." So here's some religious trauma from my childhood. And I said, "I mean, you're right. I'm not having anyone's kid. Like, you're correct." And that was it. He like hugged me goodbye, and I like skipped my way off to my summer camp, and we just kind of never talked about it again. And then as his memory started to decline, there was a day where I was talking about the person that I was dating, and he looked really confused. And I said, "Oh, well, Dad, I'm gay." He said, "What?" And I was like, we've done this already. I just almost called him brother, which is something I say now. And I was like, we've already done this, Dad. Like, we've walked through this before. He had just forgotten.
Yeah.
He just didn't remember. And he said, "Oh, okay." That was it. "Oh, okay."
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I guess that was easy again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he died, and I was very sad, but still very gay. And I just like went and lived my little gay life. I like went to high school and dated girls and hung out, and things were really great. I was like in the midst of my grief, but not dealing with this like deep unnamed trauma. Sadness in myself anymore. Things started to take shape around like putting words to feelings. My mom got me a really great therapist. Shout out to her. And I started to unpack like my grief apart from my otherness. And I was like, oh, those things aren't intertwined at all. Like I'm just sad because grief is sad. And I graduated high school, had a lot of gay friends. Like once I came out, other people started coming out in my graduating class, and there were a whole lot of us. It seemed that people were just kind of waiting in the shadows almost for like a someone to jump in. And once I was in,
and they're like, oh, well, you know, it didn't go so horrible for Kelsey.
Yeah. They're like, oh, she's still doing it. Yeah. I guess it's okay. And it's been great. The people that I continue to connect with from my childhood are those same people that came out and now are like, I don't know, living healthy gay lives, which is nice. I think I spent so much time thinking I would be a statistic because that's the only messaging that I saw was the like anti-gay or like gay's okay, but you're going to be bullied type of advocacy that was online. Like,
or that you're not going to be able to live a full and abundant life.
Yeah, either that or like if you happen to be okay, your life's going to be still filled with difficult things to traverse. Which like, yeah, because life is hard. Yeah. And being a human is hard, not because of who I love or how I show up in the world or the way that I express myself, just because being a human is tough.
It is,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and I wish I would have learned that earlier, that like the things that make me the most me don't make my life harder. Life is just hard.
Yeah.
And if you find good people to shoulder the storm with, then
Yeah.
like you can do hard things.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, great. Then we can all get through it.
That is 100%, I think, a beautiful outlook and like way to approach life.
I mean, it kind of has to be. There's so much despair. And I think about it now in our current reality is like,
Yeah.
there's so much bad that we have to remind ourselves doubly to look for the good.
Yeah.
And that goodness looks a lot like being a college campus pastor and being able to like be the visible presence for people, that they are safe and loved and cared for, not just by me, but by God,
Yeah.
who knit them together, but also walks with them on whatever journey they're on. I think God is paying me back in kind to allow me to have the call that I have now, because congregational ministry can be really tiring. Sometimes it's more difficult to see up close the ways that your ministry is changing lives, because it feels like, well, I've got to show up and, oh, the trash cans aren't emptied, or like, where's that third page in my sermon? Did it blow out as I was getting out of the car? But being with people in a company-based model like campus ministry has been so rewarding. Like, they're in school to graduate, so like, good, get on out of here and go be good humans in the world. But also, this may be the first time that anyone has ever heard that it's okay to be themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like, when you've kind of escaped maybe a difficult upbringing or a household where you don't feel valid and cared for and loved, when you don't hear from the people who should be telling you, there is nothing that you could do that would cause me to love you any less.
Yeah.
Like, we get to be those people.
Yeah.
We get to tell people that. And there's an innate power and responsibility in that. But there is also so much joy in being able to, maybe for the first time, be the person who says those words to somebody.
So what got you, what was your call like when you felt that call to go and do this thing?
I thought I was going to be a nurse. I had a very narrow mindset of how to help people in the world, but I had always felt called to being a person that helped people navigate the realities of what it means to be human. A lot of that call to nursing came out of caring for my father. I went to a very small private liberal arts Lutheran college, shout out Wagner College in Staten Island, New York. And it was one of the best schools in the country for nursing. So I went there and put on my little study cap and worked my way through all of the prerequisites for the nursing program. And it was hard. Like, it was really hard. Probably some of the hardest work, like schoolwork, that I had ever done. And I got to the end of my freshman year and I was just burnt out. I just felt like I was really trying hard and the grades weren't always what they needed to be. And I felt a lot of pressure to show up for my family and to do the things that they had kind of tasked me with doing, which was go to school, be a good student, get good grades, get a degree.
Go get a job.
Yeah, go get a job. And hopefully that job makes you money, right? Like that was what it was very much focused on. And I had come from a Lutheran background. I'm a lifelong Lutheran. My parents are Lutheran. The rest of my family is all varieties of Christian. My church was really excited for me to be a nurse and to continue our church legacy at Wagner. And I was really worried about disappointing them. But then God happened.
Yeah, usually.
I received an invitation to come and work at a summer camp in New Jersey, Crossroads Camp and Retreat Center, for a summer on summer staff that summer of freshman year. And it blew my mind. I was there to work in the kitchen. And if you've ever been a camp person, if you've ever worked in the kitchen, that's where the work is happening. Those are the early hours. That's the hot, blazing sun. That is like the sweaty, dirty dishwater in your shoes kind of work. But I wasn't a counselor. I wasn't hanging out with the kids day in and day out. I was preparing their meals, and they were very thankful. And it was great to see them through the little dish window when they pushed their dishes toward me. But I kind of felt like, what am I doing here? Who am I helping? The last week of the summer, my boss said to me, hey, we have a senior high this week coming up, and I would really like for you to be a counselor for our senior high group. You're going to be a co-counselor with this firecracker of a woman who is still one of my best friends this day, Niamh Gavin from Ireland. And he said, go and do it. You know what to do. You went through the same training as everybody else. Go be their counselor. And I walked with them. We ended up doing an activity partway through the week in which these campers were sharing just like deep, personal, horrible things about their lives. And Niamh and I were there as presents, as people to accompany them, to shelter them and shoulder them through these tough conversations. We ended up having to walk with a camper through a reporting situation from that activity. And when it was all done, this camper ended up leaving camp that final week and going back home. We had an end of the summer picnic that all of the campers came back for. And I was reunited with this camper who we had journeyed together with. And she looked me in the face after hugging me. She pulled back and she said, you saved my life. And it was like a punch in the chest. It was like, oh, so you mean helping people is not just nursing, is not just sick person need help fix, but actually it's just being a presence for people who have never had a presence before, who have never had an advocate before, who have never had a safe place to unload or be themselves or discover before. And I went back to Wagner in the fall, and I changed my major from nursing to history. And I called a friend on the phone that I knew worked in admissions at a seminary, and I said, hey, I think I'm going to do this thing. What do you think? And he said, we've been waiting for you.
Aww.
And I said, well, I guess we make plans and God laughs. And it's been a gay old time ever since. Honestly, I went through a seminary that I think really saw the whole me as a person, that never tried to shape me into the pastor that they thought I should be, but rather gave me the tools to learn the pastor that I already was. I met a whole lot of great people on the journey who affirmed that call and whose calls I was able to affirm. And I graduated. And then I waited a long time for our first call. In the ELCA, our calls are based on congregational or extended calls. We don't get ordained just because we have the knowledge, right? And I waited a lot longer than any of my classmates to get a first call. And
you graduated with me, right? 2020?
2019.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think
so. Then I
really
worked at the seminary in admissions for a year waiting for this call. And there were churches that interviewed me, but I was too black and I was too gay and I was too loud or not what they were looking for. Most of the time it was, I just don't think you're the right fit. But when you're told that enough times, you start to figure out kind of what that means. And then I was called to a African descent congregation in my home synod that had a wide welcome, that was reconciling in Christ and was excited to welcome not only a pastor that they felt was a really good fit for them, but also was a pastor that encompassed intersections that they felt glad to be led by, both as a Black woman and a queer person. And we did good work in the midst of some really difficult times in our city. New York was hit violently hard by the coronavirus pandemic. And then God said, I know you're getting married to the love of your life, but hold on while I do a new thing.
Yeah. I'm going to need you to pick up your life.
2 weeks after you get married and move to a different state away from your spouse and your friends, because you're being called to be in this place. And it's been the best thing that could have happened. It has been difficult. There has been struggle and strife, but this call has been the softest place to land, because every day I go and do my job, I know that it matters. Not only the students say it, but I can see it in the way that they care for each other and the moments that I'm privileged to witness. I know that God was right in ordaining these things. So the journey might have been long, but it reminds me of kind of the Bible passage or story that has kind of guided this journey for me.
Yeah, which I want to share, actually, if we can, because that I actually asked Pastor Kelsey to talk, like knowing this would come out, and like I usually like kind of follow the lectionary. But I was like, you know what? I just really want to hear Pastor Kelsey's story and to have her share that with us. And then I asked, like, is there a particular Bible passage that like you really just like sticks with you and you know, it kind of encompasses your story and stuff? And she named this passage, and I was like, would you believe the work of the Holy Spirit? Man, does that lady do some good stuff. Look at that. That happens to be our gospel lesson for the day. So I'm not going to read the whole passage, but this is Mark 5, and I'm going to read verses 25 through 25 through 34, which is a chunk of this larger lesson for this Sunday. Now, there was a woman who had been suffering from her hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "But if I could touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhaging stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately, aware that power had gone from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. The thing about it is my parents loved me, and their support of me through my process of coming out was a gift and a godsend, and something that I do not take lightly. But my church was a different story. I had a pastor that was pretty aggressive in his denunciation of LGBTQIA plus people in ministry, but also just like as humans who exist in the world. He would say some pretty horrible things, and it wasn't just what he believed in his personal experience. He would say them from the pulpit.
Yeah.
I like to believe that I am maybe the world's oldest acolyte. I would come home from college on the weekends to acolyte at my home congregation as like a 21-year-old.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, I know. A little weird, but I love the Lord. What can I say? And how difficult it was as a high schooler to hear these words being said by a pastor.
Right.
And a person that I loved,
Yeah.
that not only was my faith leader, but was somehow deeply intertwined in my family. He and my dad, as Black men in our community, were close friends and had a close personal relationship. He married my parents and baptized my siblings and did the same for me, walked me through college decisions and the death of my father. But he never saw me. Not really. And not all the parts of me. And I remember hearing him say these words and sitting behind him in the chancel as an acolyte, panicked. Panicked that everyone else knew that I was a joke or a liar or a fake, that everyone else believed him and what he was saying. And I would look to my mom in the sanctuary from the chancel, and she would just nod at me. It was an unspoken language of like, just let him say whatever.
Yeah.
We see you, we love you, we care for you. So when I became acquainted with the text from Mark, I too felt like I had been hiding this very visible part of me, that it had separated me from the people I loved and the community that I was a part of, but there was nothing that anyone could do to make the shame and the hurt and the fear that I had felt go away. And I spent so much time thinking about what my pastor felt about me, or what the elders in my community felt about me, that I never really stopped to ask myself what Jesus felt about me.
Yeah.
I never really asked what work Jesus could be doing in my life, or how my commitment to my faith was perceived by the one who knew me and created me to be who I was, until I reached out and touched the garment, until I brought the hurt and the pain and the fear and the shame and all of those things, not to anyone else, but to God, that I realized that faithfulness, that commitment to who I know God to be and not who others were telling me God is, freed me from those feelings that had kept me down and bowed down and outcast. And it's not the same interpretation of the flow of blood, and I don't think that it has to be
Just that we like all carry something like that, right? Or like when like what is your hemorrhaging that you've been had for 12 years? If it's being holed up and being held back between you and God and your faith, right? Like what is, like, we each, does that make sense? Like, I'm following you.
Yeah. Well, what is it? What do you need to be freed from?
Yeah.
Like, it's not always.
Yeah.
It's not always
And your whole thing,
physical.
right? You're like, I'm not being freed from being gay. I'm being freed from the oppression to be who I was created to be.
Oh, 1,000%. I think that.
I'm just clarifying that in case someone is not.
Exactly. And I think it's an important clarification, because I never wanted to be anything else than who I am.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be a person, and I've maybe even always prided myself in being a person that just lived with authenticity. I've always been the kind of person that has lived life out loud, because I just don't think there's any way other than that to live.
And that's actually a really mature like mindset to life, right? And definitely not like, there's so many people that, you know, hear all these stories of like, I did all of these things, I did everything in my power to like be someone else or try to be straight or try to whatever. And it's like, but so I love your maturity of saying like, do you know what the best thing I can do is to be me?
And I honor that journey, because I know how painful it can be to try to fit yourself into a box that was never actually made to hold you, right? Like what that looks like. I honor our siblings who have walked that walk of lessening themselves for other people. But I wore a tutu to school every day of 6th grade.
I love that for you.
Right? Like I was just always a little weird. There was no, I think that's what made people identify me as other, because they were like, well, why does this person think they can take up this much space? Right? Like, why does this person
are you
think
not trying to fit into this pre-prescribed box of what you're supposed to be doing?
exactly? And when you come from,
because I did the exact opposite, Kelsey. I did everything in my power to like fit in, to try to look and act like the other girls, and like to buy the certain brands of clothes that I thought that I needed to in order to fit some mold that I think I was supposed to be in. For years and years and years and years.
it's sad. It's sad,
It really
because
is.
that's not like a unique experience.
Nope.
As much as I love you and I think that your story is unique to you, there are still people out here doing that thing.
Yep.
And for some people it's a protective measure, right? Like, it is costly to be
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
It's not like easy breezy beautiful cover girl, I will tell you that. But I think that
But my thing is, like, is it worth the cost, right? Like, I look back at it now and like I think about how much anxiety and how much like depression that I was in, and the whole thing is it was just trying to do something, and so much energy that went into that. What did I cost myself by not being able to live like that, by not just being who I was supposed to be?
Yeah, and I think like I think that's why we continue to show up now in the world as we do, because we want to make space for others who feel that way. To say like, don't do that. Don't do what I did.
I find that as a very big call to my ministry too, to be like, okay, here's the thing that I can do. I want you to know that you are loved and cherished and exactly who you're supposed to be, and like, what space can I create so that you don't have to feel the trauma that I felt? That this next generation of college students, of high schoolers, of youth, like, that they get to grow up in a place where they don't have to do that. I think it's my whole dream. Whatever my daughter is going to be, I hope that like she grows up in a place where like she can just be who she's supposed to be.
Yeah. It's like, at the table, we call ourselves, and have kind of coined the rubber ducky as like our thing. And it's because we say we're all odd ducks, that there's no like one way to be a person that lives in the world. And I spent so much time in my life being told by other people that I was like the spokesperson for the island of misfit toys. Like, I was just kind of the leftovers, right? Like the weird black fat gay kid who like used humor to step over all of the like horrible things that other people had said. I think that actually was in turn a gift to say like,
it sure was.
You want me to be miserable, you want me to be sad and cast down, but I actually just have joy. It's why when people ask me now why pride matters, right? Like, why parades? Like, when I see people online saying like, well, what about the straight pride parades? Like, our ancestors, both queer and, for me, black, like, they didn't fight so that I just sat in my house and was like glad that I have the rights that I have. They fought for them. And my response to that fighting is not to be bitter that they had to fight, but rather to be exuberant in the expression of my belovedness, because it is a gift that I don't have to fight as hard. And I will say, as we continue to push for protections, for rights, for visibility for all of our siblings, it is to say that if it's not my fight, then I need to be a co-conspirator in supporting my siblings who are continuing this work, which is why the work of Jamie, the work of this of fighting for the generation that is continuing to come, or even the work of unclobbering the texts that have been used to berate and batter us, is still such vital work.
Yep.
I saw an
it's not
image.
over. So can I say, just I'm gonna interrupt you, but like
No,
say that like I've said this phrase before in various church settings, is I and my family are accepted a lot more than many queer folks in the church. I say that I am a palatable gay.
Love it.
And like, in a way that like, to understand that what's helpful for me, and like understanding that I'm a palatable gay in a way that like I have the certain privileges, that I am still a cisgender woman, that I am still white, that I still stand on a whole host of shoulders of privilege. And so what my job is to be an ally. I am a black ally. I am a trans ally. Like, those are the things that, like, that's what my call continues to be. Because the fight is not over. While I may be palatable to you, that you can tolerate my family being here, there are so many people that still don't have that. And that requires just so much. It's that, like, pride isn't necessarily just a parade, a celebration. Like, it is still a protest to say, there's still so much work to be done.
Well, we're not all free until we're all free.
Yes.
Right? Like, if the last thing I can do is, as I step up the ladder, is to turn around
and kick someone else down,
then what are we doing?
Yeah.
The infighting in the community, I mean, we could go on for hours, right? But I saw, my wife posted this image for Pride, and she's a camp director. So she has a lot of youth that she attends to, that she cares for deeply. Is pride still matters because someone today thinks that they're better off dead than who they are. Yeah. And that's it. It's like, we stand here to remind people that it doesn't have to be like this. That it's not just pride because parties are fun. It's pride because the opposite of pride is shame. Right? That, like, we're not just doing this because it's like fun and fancy and free. We're doing it because the alternative is to hide. Yeah. And I'm done hiding. Yeah. Just as the woman with the flow of blood was done hiding from her society, done from being outcast, was fed up with what she had been given, and her last opportunity, her last gesture of hope was to reach out and touch Jesus's garment. And he could have been mad, and he could have been frustrated. And we've done the exegetical work on this text ad nauseum. Like, they were so tightly packed in that Jesus, everyone was touching him, right? And they were so tightly packed in that as Jesus was journeying, many people were falling at his feet. But for him to turn for a moment and not just acknowledge this woman, but to really see her and then say, your faith, your inability to be shamed into silence, your inability to be cast aside is what has saved you. It is what has made you well. Is why we do this. It is so that we can turn to those who come to us reaching for something, reaching for a garment, to be known to touch and seen.
Jesus when someone has told them they can't.
Exactly. And we have the opportunity to extend that hand on behalf of the one who we serve, to say, like, come on. Yeah. There's nothing like it. Yeah. And I don't think there ever will be. I hope to feel this way till the day I die. I really do. I hope that in the same way that we see people like Marsha or Harvey Milk or Cecilia Gentile, like, when we see these ancestors who have gone on, that we feel like we've done something to. Yeah. That's my hope.
And you know what? And say that's it. That's what we're here to be, pastors, and why we celebrate Pride. And when you go out and you see a Pride parade and you see, like the pastors that said, this pastor loves you, right? Like, there's a reason, is because there's so many people that are out there like that woman that are just trying to touch Jesus and have been told no, have been pushed back, have been pushed aside, and to say no. There's place for you too, that Jesus sees you, that you are also welcome, is like, that's what pride is.
Yeah, it is. And I don't care if I ever see those people ever again. I'm not here so that they come to my church.
Yeah.
I'm not here so they sit in the pew. I'm not here so they show up so that we have a check mark that we can check off a box of. I'm here because it matters to be here, that the absence is felt.
Yes, it is.
And because it is felt, then the presence is felt, maybe even more so.
Yep.
I think that's why we're doing this thing.
We are.
Why it matters.
Thank you, Pastor Kelsey, for sharing your story, for sharing the wonderfulness that is you, and for helping us close out this beautiful Pride Month for the podcast, and helping us as we celebrate becoming a reconciling in Christ community, and what that means for us in this work in this world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much for continuing to journey with us and to learn with us. As always, you can learn more about the podcast at 10footpolepodcast.com, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram and wherever you listen to podcasts. The 10 Foot Pole Podcast is proudly a ministry of the Delaware Maryland Synod, and you can always learn more about them at demdsynod.org. Take care.